All right, so let's continue our discussion. Um, and we were looking at dynamic parallelism, where we said that if you have nested loops where the loop bound of each individual I iteration for j, right, the loop bound for j for the ith iteration is going to be kind of data dependent. If that happens and it keeps changing, then we are going to have some motivation to use dynamic parallelism. Otherwise, you could as well collapse the loops. I mean, in the sense that launch the threads with number of launch the kernel with number of threads equal to number of iterations of I multiplied by number of iterations of j. So within that, there were three. We decomposed the discussion into three parts: computation, memory, and synchronization. Computation is what we were looking at. So one of the examples that we talked about was that the host launches the parent kernel, right, with 256 threads in the same thread block. And then each individual kernel writes to a memory location according to its thread ID, synchronizes with all other threads, and then thread 0 launches the child kernel with again 256 blocks, 256 threads, and then waits for that particular thread to finish. And then after that, it synchronizes with the other threads within that thread block. The parent waits for other, synchronizes with the other threads. That means as far as writing to this array data is concerned, that is done by all the parents initially. However, I mean, all the parent threads in the parent launch kernel. However, only one thread is going to launch the child kernel, and all the threads, 256 threads of that child kernel, are going to read and write to the same array. The question was, what happens if the two sync threads get removed? And there was some discussion towards the end, which was a little imprecise. So I wanted to give you some more time. So now, are there any suggestions on what will happen? Okay, so just to recap, with both the sync threads, we ensure that whatever was data of thread ID x.x written by 256 threads of the parent launch, those are all going to be available when individual threads in the child launch are going to read data of thread ID x.x. So all of that is going to be made sure that that is available, because child launch is happening after sync threads. Similarly, because of the second sync threads, which is after CUDA device synchronize of thread 0, it is also guaranteed that after that sync threads, all the other threads of the parent launch will have visibility or access to whatever was written by the children. Right? Now the question is, what happens when you don't have these two sync threads?
So without the first sync threads, we can't ensure that all the data elements will be initialized correctly. The kernel might get launched before the threads are written to data thread ID x.x initially.
Okay. Okay.
If you remove the second sync threads, I don't think it should make a difference, because first of all, the parent cannot return unless all the children are finished. And there is a CDS there, and thread IDX, thread 0 will not come to that point until it has finished, until the CDS gets over. And once it comes there, it's anyway waiting with all the threads.
Okay. 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 So the first sync threads is required. The second thing, sync threads doesn't cause any. I mean, removal of second sync threads doesn't cause any problem, is what Niranjan suggested. Any other suggestions? Okay. So is there anybody who says that first sync threads is optional? Okay. Is there anybody who says that the second sync threads is important? Okay. So, okay, Sai Chaitanya is also suggesting what is the use of second sync threads. That's correct. As far as, I mean, there is nothing that is really I have coded after that sync threads. But what that means is essentially that if you do not have the sync threads, the writing from the children threads, whether that will be visible to the other threads in the parent thread block. That is the question. Niranjan has indicated that since there is CDS, that is going to anyway ensure that the thread 0 is anyway going to wait for child launch to be finished, and therefore its effects will also be visible. Okay, so
Sir, I think that applies only for the 0 to warp. But if there are more warps and there's further processing on the data array, then we might need the second sync threads.
right. Yeah. So what Niranjan is suggesting is that that second sync threads is probably going to be important. For thread 0 or warp 0, it won't matter, but for other warps, it's definitely going to matter. Ashutosh is suggesting it will be visible to all threads even without sync threads, because end of kernel is also a global barrier. Okay, so let's analyze these suggestions. If there is any other suggestion, please feel free to post. Okay, so let's see what is happening with respect to the sync threads. The first sync threads is amongst whom? The first sync threads is amongst the 256 threads of the parent launch. Right? Anyway, the child threads are anyway not yet launched by now. So this is going to make sure that data of threadx.x is going to be visible for anybody who is going to be launched after this. Why? Because this child launch is going to be done by some parent, right? Here we have chosen the parent as thread 0, but it could be any of the other parents also. And it will still ensure that the child launch, I mean, the child threads are going to see whatever was before, because all the effects from all the other threads of the parent launch are going to be made visible because of the sync threads before the child gets launched. Right? So all the global data is going to be available to all the child threads, and therefore first sync threads is definitely going to be required to make sure that all the 256 threads which are launched from only thread 0 are going to see the data which was written. So if you don't have sync threads, if you don't have the first sync threads, then what is ensured is that only thread 0's write has happened. This is a little imprecise statement. I'll make it precise. Only thread 0's write is going to be visible when child launch happens. But other threads, for example, thread 200, when it is writing to data of 200 here, that may not be visible to all the children which are launched from thread 0. Right? Therefore, first sync threads is definitely required. The imprecision in my statement was about the thread versus warp. Since we have SIMD execution and the way warps get executed, warp 0, that is threads 0 to 31 of the parent, are going to have their data accessible to all the children which are launched from thread 0 in this case. Okay. That means the data of 32 to 255 may not be visible to the children, and therefore this update by the children may not be reflecting the old value. Does that seem reasonable? Anybody has any issues with the first sync threads discussion?
Sir, just
Yeah.
one doubt about the memory hierarchy in GPUs. So, at what level do we have the L1 or L2 caches?
At
Or how
what
many
level?
SMs, like how many SMs share the L1 cache and how many SMs share the L2 cache?
So all the SM is usually common across all the SMs. L2, sorry. L2 is common across all the SMs, and L1 is typically at the SM level.
Oh, so each SM has its own
Yes,
L1.
yes. Each SM will have its own, and that's why the thread blocks that we launch. But that doesn't mean that all the thread blocks will have their own, will share L1. It just means that any thread block which gets assigned will have access to the same L1. I mean, all the threads within the thread block.
Sir, so here the sync threads is ensuring that the writes are being committed to the global memory as well, right?
Yes, yes, that is correct. So sync threads is ensuring that the writes to the data in global memory are visible to the other threads in the thread block also. That is correct. But sync threads doesn't ensure that the writes from one thread block are visible to the other thread.
Sir, uh, so when we say sync thread writes from one thread block are visible to the other thread block, is it because sir, but we said that it will be the write will be committed to the global memory, right? Not the L2 cache. Then not the L2 cache. Then how do we say that others won't be able to see?
So the writes from one thread block are definitely not guaranteed to be visible to the other thread blocks because of sync threads, but those might happen in global memory or might be written to the last level cache. It could be L2, it could be L3. So that is a hardware optimization. But if there is another thread block which is trying to read um, from the same memory location, and if there is only sync threads, then it is not guaranteed. It could be as well written in L1, for example, and so that it is visible only to the other threads of the same thread block, but not to the other.
Sir, so sync threads is not giving us any guarantee that it's going to be written to global memory.
No, no, no. There is no such guarantee. That is correct. So as part of the optimization, it will get written in L1 or L2 or L3 or global memory, but it could be as well at L1 level itself. The guarantee is only within the thread block.
So that's why we can't guarantee that any other thread will be able to see that this write has been committed. Like it won't notice that this has happened.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other concerns here?
Sir, if the number is greater than 1024, then this code won't work as we expected, right? Like we need to keep global thread barriers. That's what you mean to say, PS.
Yes. Yes. So if you had, let's say, more than one thread blocks here, then that sync threads is not going to be useful anyway, in the sense that since we are launching it from thread 0, only the writes from that particular thread block are going to be guaranteed to be visible to this child launch. Otherwise, the other thread blocks, the writes may not be visible.
Okay. Got it.
Any other concerns? Okay. So, okay, so we talked about the first sync threads. Let's talk about the second sync threads, what happens. Now, when you have the 256 data elements are being written by the child, after that there is CUDA device synchronize. What does that mean? CUDA device synchronize is being executed by whom? It's being executed by only thread IDX equal to 0. That means only thread 0 is going to wait for the child launch. Now that only thread 0 is again imprecise. It has to be in SIMD fashion, and therefore the other threads of the same warp are going to wait till thread 0 finishes CDS. But as far as threads 32 to 255 are concerned, those are going to go ahead and they are going to wait for sync threads here. So when thread 0 finishes its CDS, that means all the children have finished writing to their memory locations, and CDS is going to ensure that the writes from the children are going to be visible to the parent thread. Therefore, thread 0 will see the effect of whatever has been written after CUDA device synchronize. After that, all the warp threads synchronize, and therefore all the writes from the children are going to be anyway accessible to all the warp threads 0 to 31 of the parent launch. After sync threads, the writes from the children threads of thread 0 are going to be visible to all the threads of the same thread block, that is this parent 256 threads. So if you do not have sync threads, what this ensures only is that only the warp threads are going to have access to whatever was written by the children of thread 0, and those writes may not be visible to the other threads, other warps of the parent thread block. And therefore second sync threads is required if, I have not written any statements here. If there was some statement here which is reading from whatever was written by the children, then that will be visible only to warp 0 and not to the other warps. Right? Does that seem reasonable? Any confusion, suggestions? So this is a little imprecise statement. It should be data of 0 to 31. And similarly, this is only threads, only warp 0, let's put it that way. That is threads 0 to 31 are guaranteed to see the child modifications. Okay, shall we move ahead? Any suggestions, questions, concerns here? Okay. So let's move from computation part to the memory part. We also said that as far as global memory or constant memory or texture memory is concerned, that pointer you can pass from parent to child and even child to parent in some cases, but you should not pass address of local and shared memory, and that is what is kind of mentioned here. So in parents local memory, that is on stack, I am allocating, let's say, some array, and then I am passing that array to the child. If this would have been, so that is illegal. And this can get caught by the compiler. But if this would have been only int x array without the array part, right? So, which means that it's a simple integer, that integer can be passed because it is going to get copied by value. So passing that value is okay, but not as an array because it gets passed by reference. Similarly, the arguments that get passed, which are pointers to global memory, which are allocated using either CUDA malloc or new on the GPU, as well as the global variables or malloc. I should probably put it as malloc, or global __ device __. Those global variables can be passed from parent to the child. That is not an issue. Right? So for example, if value is a global variable, I can just assign value equal to 5 and pass its address or its value directly, R value or address to the child kernel. That is okay. All right. So this is just for us to be aware, because sometimes we tend to pass on some information which is local to a particular thread to its children, which is quite common in, let's say, P threads or MPI programming, where not MPI, but P threads programming, I should say, where from the parent, everything is on the host, right? So they are sharing the same memory. Similar thing is happening here also, but that is not allowed to be done for the local variables. And this also indicates that although this is a device function, right, the kernel can also be called from there. Yeah, you should probably have a CDS after this, but otherwise it is all right. Okay, the third part about the dynamic.
Sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when we say that we cannot pass a pointer to a shared memory, a local memory is fine. But when you say we can't pass a pointer to a shared memory, that kind of indicates that the children don't share the blocks, right, of the parents.
Yeah,
Because
so
otherwise-
local as well as shared memory address you should not pass. Yeah, that is an indication that you might swap out that particular block as far as shared memory is concerned, and some other block might come into play there, and therefore they might share the same address. That is the reason. Whereas global memory, it is all in the sense there is no reuse of global memory. Right? Whereas shared memory can get used. When one thread block is executing, it is in L1, it is using some part of L1. Then another block comes in, it might be using the same part of L1. That is possible. And therefore, we should not pass those as addresses. Any other concerns here?
Sir,
Yeah, Vinky.
the passing, is it a syntactic check, or like is it something that happens at runtime and causes issues?
So the compiler does try to find out such issues, and it is able to find out some of the issues. It cannot identify all the issues, as we said about pointers, but yeah, some of the issues compiler will be able to figure out, but by and large you will receive sec fault or arbitrary most probably you will see arbitrary results at runtime.
Okay, sir.
Any other concerns here? All right, so let's talk about the third part, which is about the synchronization. And this is where you will see that there are some restrictions on the dynamic parallelism and why it is not as, let's say, holy grail as it looks like.
Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah.
In the previous slide, the SM which is executing the device function, will it also execute the child kernel also? Is it like that, or it is scheduling and it can be executed by some other SM?
Okay, the question here is the SM which is executing the parent, whether the same SM is going to execute the child.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am not sure. I am not sure. I would imagine that it can go to some other SM also.
My doubt was because if it is being executed by the same SM itself, then it should be legal to pass a pointer or shared local memory to the child kernel. That's what my doubt was.
No, that cannot be done because even for an SM, there are multiple thread blocks which are sharing L1.
Okay.
So even for one SM, you won't be able to get the correct answer, right? Because that scratchpad memory, that is going to be kind of fixed, right, for one SM. But we can launch it with arbitrary number of blocks. And we definitely don't have that much memory, which means that there will be some parts which are going to be swapped out and in. And therefore, the addresses will turn out to be the same for the shared memory if you have a large number of thread blocks assigned to the same SM. So that can still happen.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
As far as local memory is concerned, there you are right that the local memory is actually allocated on stack. And isn't it possible that I might assign different memory locations for local memory? But again, the similar issue comes that the local memory which is on the stack, although it is mapped to global memory, that the thread block which is executing might get moved out, another thread block might come in, and therefore it might start using the same set of stack locations. The restore might happen to the same address. Right? So therefore, there is a possibility that the local values will also be wrong. So since the global variables as well as CUDA malloc, etc. are happening totally separately, and their lifetime is, not only lifetime, but those are not touched when other thread blocks are getting scheduled. Right? So therefore, it is all right to use the global memory. That was a good discussion. Thank you for a good amount of interaction. Okay. So let's come to this synchronization part. So the grids that unfortunately get launched into the same stream are executed in order, right? So this is something which we know already, which means that the kernels which get pushed to the same stream, these are executed in order. Yeah, about the previous question, that whether it is going to be in the same SM, I don't know what happens, but my guess is that it should be possible to move it around across to two other SMs. Although from the logistical perspective, it might still be okay to launch it in the child kernels in the same SM.
Sir,
Yeah, Venkat.
sir, we don't have control over which SM gets which thread block, right?
Yes, that we don't have.
So, like, why are we discussing the possibility of like it being
So
launched
this,
same
yeah,
one?
yeah. So this was being discussed because we were feeling that if because of which shared memory can it get shared. If it is going to another SM, then shared memory can definitely be not shared. Can that be a reason? So that's the reason this question came.
Sir, but it's again runtime non-determinism, right? We can't be sure what will happen. So, I mean, so we don't know if it will get assigned to the same SM. So,
That's what we currently don't know. But assuming that this would have been the case, that all the child kernels are executed in the same SM, and
Oh.
you have some shared memory in the parent, then that shared memory is anyway going to be available in the same SM. So why can't it be passed to the children? That was the question.
Oh, okay, sir.
Yeah. So yeah, I would imagine that there is no real reason here to stop it from executing on another SM. So it should be possible. Although for optimization purpose it might do, but there is nothing that is really getting shared across them. So it might be okay, because it's only the global memory and the constant memory which is getting shared. So it can as well be running on any SM. Okay. As far as events are concerned, well, we also know this part, that those are used to create dependencies across streams and synchronize across streams. Now the main part. So the streams and the events which get created within a kernel, these exist within the thread block scope, right? And we have to understand what this means. What does that mean? That means that if these streams and events get used from another thread block, then they do not have any valid behavior, right? So they have some sort of an undefined behavior. So I'll just explain that in the next point. So what that means is that all the threads of a thread block, right? All the threads of a thread block by default launch their kernels, that is the child kernels, into the same default stream. What does that mean? That means that although we have large amount of parallelism that you can kind of predict from the perspective of child kernels, if you have two thread blocks and each thread block contains 1024 threads, and if these 1024 threads launch their own kernels, since these 1024 threads are in the same thread block, they all, that is 1024 threads, are going to launch their own child kernels into the same stream. And therefore, they are all going to get executed in sequence. So it's not that we are going to get 2048 into the number of child threads which get created in the child kernel launch. That is not the amount of parallelism that we'll get. We'll get it equal to the number of thread blocks of the parent. Right? So this is where the dynamic parallelism has limitations, and this is primarily done from the perspective of the limited nature of resources which are available for launching the child kernels. And therefore, many people, when the dynamic parallelism came up, many people were gung-ho and enthusiastic about, okay, I can launch, I can have nested parallelism, etc. But when they tried it, it actually they figured out that the amount of time that they that the nested parallel or the dynamic parallelism kernel takes is sometimes more than what otherwise you would have done by combining these two loops together. And therefore dynamic parallelism has not been very widely used, although it does get used when you have a smaller number of iterations. So some sequentiality is all right. So, but not at very large scale. Right? So this should be understood that the threads which are going to parent threads of the same thread block, they are going to execute their child kernels in sequence because they are all going to the same stream, right? Same default stream. Whereas the child kernels from two threads, from two thread blocks of the parent, they can have their own default stream. And therefore they can be executed in parallel, assuming that enough resources are available. Any concerns, questions here? Okay. So because of this, the overheads are going to be a little high. And I'll mention where all the overheads come into play. As I was mentioning that people have found that the dynamic parallelism can have its overheads. In fact, there have been research work to figure out under what circumstances or in what manner you should be using dynamic parallelism. So how to get your dynamic parallelism right? So or working. That is some research which was done some years ago when DP was.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, can you explain the last point again?
Yeah, the last point was that if you have, let's say that the parent kernel is launched with two thread blocks, right? And so as far as these two thread blocks are concerned, when they launch their own child kernels, these child kernels from two thread blocks can have their own different default stream. So although we are not specifying any default stream there, they can have their own default stream. So the parallelism exists across thread blocks for the child kernels. If I launch from these 1024 threads of the same thread block, child kernels of some size, all these kernels are going to get queued up into the same stream because the parent thread block is going to be the same for all these child kernels. So if there are 1024 threads, I am launching 1024 kernels, 1024 grids. All these 1024 grids are going to be executed sequentially. Whereas the other 1024 grids, which get created because of the second thread block, these might go into another default stream, which is again unnamed, but the runtime is going to make sure that it gets a different stream, assuming that the resources are available. So there will be some parallelism across the two child kernel launches across thread blocks, 0 and 1. But as far as single thread block is concerned, all those are executed in sequence.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Mohit, does that seem reasonable for you also? Yeah. This point only holds for default streams. Yes. So is it possible that you launch the child kernels into a different stream? Yes, that is possible. You will have to launch it per thread of the parent thread block into per thread of the parent thread block into a different stream. So assuming that you have, let's say, launching 10 child kernels from 10 different threads of the parent, right? And these are named differently, stream of I or stream of thread idx.x, then will it go into a different stream? Yes. And as long as you have resources, some parallelism you will get when pushing it into the 10 different streams. That is correct, Kshitij. So does that mean can you have streams in the child kernel? Yeah, I think that is allowed. You can have streams, and you can declare streams and pass, launch the kernels into that particular stream. No problem. Okay. So we were talking about the overheads. So for launching the kernel, each kernel, it could be parent kernel, it could be child kernel, the CUDA driver and the runtime system, it needs to parse certain parameters, right? What is meant by parse parameters? That is, the parameters are going to get passed to the each thread which is going to run, right? So if I'm launching a kernel with 1024 threads, 1024 threads should get all those parameters, right? So the kernel that we have written __ global, that has some function name, and then there are some parameters. All these parameters are going to be local to each thread. And that means if I'm launching it with 1024 threads, I need to essentially make 1024 copies of that, assuming that none of them is a constant. If this would have been a constant, then maybe you can share some memory location. But otherwise, these are all local to that particular thread. So those many parameters need to be passed, right? And then issue the kernel dispatch. That means that it is going to be some sort of a function call, which is going to get executed and work upon by different threads onto the parameters which are specified. So there will be multiple execution units, and each one of them is going to jump to a particular instruction, which is going to be, let's say, the first instruction inside the kernel. Right? Very similar to what the function calls are, right, on the host. The kernels which are waiting to be executed are inserted into another buffer, which is also called as sometimes the command queue, which gets modeled as there is some fixed size buffer and then there is a variable sized buffer. Fixed size buffer is fast, right? The variable sized buffer is going to be large, because large and possibly kept somewhere far away. So the reason why this gets done is because the number of child kernels that can get launched is not statically determinable. Right? It can be dependent on the number of parent threads, and the number of parent threads is arbitrarily large. That is in the hands of the programmer. So if the number of kernels that are going to get launched is going to be small, then it will fit into this fixed size buffer. I don't know, but my feeling is that this fixed size buffer might be having some fixed set of registers which might get used, and therefore this is likely to be faster. Beyond this fixed size pool, it is going to go into the global memory and or some sort of system memory which the GPU might use, and therefore that access is going to be little slower, and therefore the kernel execution will incur overhead if it goes beyond a certain number of kernel launches. All right, so these are a couple of things that add overhead. The third point is that if the parent thread, right, the parent thread which was launching the child kernel, if it explicitly synchronizes with the child, then it needs to, we need to free resources of the child first of all. But if that waiting time turns out to be large, because the parent is now waiting for the child threads to finish, then the parent kernel might get swapped, right? This swapping is similar to active grids versus inactive grids, right, that we were talking about. Sometimes we were talking about it in the context of global barrier as resident thread blocks. And then later, when we were talking about multiple kernels being launched using streams, then we talked about the resident streams and non-resident streams, etc., or resident grids and non-resident grids. So that non-resident grid is essentially swapping of, I want to free up some resources, let me push this waiting kernel into the queue and then have some ready kernel get executed on the GPU. Right? So because of which this swapping might happen, that also incurs overhead. Right? Not only in terms of memory, but also in terms of the way the runtime needs to check that the parent kernel, whether it is waiting or not, etc. Right? If the parent kernel is asynchronously executing instructions in parallel with the child, it is not having that CDS, then there is then the parent kernel is anyway going ahead, and we don't need to worry about it getting swapped, right? So those are some of the overheads, or this is how the dynamic parallelism is kind of implemented inside the hardware. and that's why it has some overheads with it, when it especially it gets seen when you have a large number of kernels getting launched. Any concerns here? Any questions?
Sir, when we say the kernel is being swapped, we mean that the entire context of the kernel, like whatever the driver is maintaining, the information corresponding to the kernel, right? I mean, I'm trying to make sense of what swapping a kernel means, because kernel is just a function which is executing. So when we are saying that we are swapping a kernel into the global memory, do we mean that whatever is the current state that the kernel is maintaining, we like whatever the device driver is maintaining for that kernel, it copies it to the global memory?
Yeah, so yeah, your question made me think a little bit about what might be happening. But yeah, to quickly give that answer, yes, all the state, for example, the grid associated with the parent kernel, which will have the thread related data, which instructions they are executing, etc. Whatever is the state of shared memory, some local memory, all of that needs to be swapped to the global memory. Right? So we need to store that state of all the threads about the parent kernel. The question that came to my mind was, if it is only a few threads of the parent kernel which are waiting for their child kernels to finish, will this still apply to the other threads which are actually executing? So that I am not sure. For example, in our case, we had the example where only thread 0 was launching the child kernel, whereas all other threads were running their own part, although later we had async threads. So will that happen? Will it still swap the complete parent kernel, although other threads are executing? That I don't know.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other concerns here? Okay. So that brings us to the next part of our topics, which is the multi-GPU processing. This is also something which some of you might be wanting to do as part of your projects. So although it looks very fancy, fancy meaning that your code is running on multiple things. There are overheads associated, but not as much as dynamic parallelism. So and it is relatively easy to use. So you should definitely try out to improve the parallelism in your code and get faster results. One thing that we need to worry about here is, like in case of CPU and GPU, we had to worry about the mem copies, that is the cost of communication. Similarly, here also we might have to worry about the cost of communication between CPU and multiple GPUs, or directly between GPUs. Right? But other than that, as far as computation is concerned, you will get, if you use 2 GPUs, you will get double the compute power. So you will be able to make use of that just by making very few changes to your code. So why multi-GPU? Well, some people might just suggest that why don't you do multiple handshakes between CPU and GPU, and that should suffice. Well, the advantage of this CPU GPU communication is that there is a known technology to communicate across CPU, and the con is that if GPU is the primary worker, right, GPU is doing most of the compute intensive work, we pay too much cost for the additional CPUs. Right? GPUs are that way going to be relatively cheaper when it comes to the amount of let's say price to performance ratio. So in such cases, buying more GPUs might turn out to be economically beneficial for a company. The way it gets connected is that so far we were saying that CPU is connected with one GPU. Now there are multiple such connections. So there might be multiple PCI Express buses which might be present in your CPU, which are connecting to different GPUs. Right? So that is possible. In some rare cases, you might have a single PCI Express bus between CPU and multiple GPUs, in which case you might have to incur some penalty when you try to communicate across multiple GPUs, because there is a single bus. So this part is okay, but there is something more which I have indicated, which is this block, which is combining multiple GPUs together, but not all the GPUs. Right? This is where something called as peer access comes into play, where groups of or pairs of GPUs can communicate with each other without involving the CPU. So GPU 1 can communicate with GPU 0 and vice versa directly. So there is going to be some sort of small interconnect between the two. Whereas there is no interconnect between 1 and 2, GPU 1 and GPU 2. So GPU 1 and GPU 2 have to communicate via the CPU. So we'll see a couple of functions corresponding to that as well. Okay, so in general, well, it's not necessary that it will have only GPUs. It can have other devices also associated. For example, it might have an FPGA attached to it, or an ASIC attached to it, or it might have GPUs of different compute capabilities. Some of your laptops might have, let's say, an NVIDIA GPU as well as an AMD GPU associated. So there are different kinds of devices which might be available, and we don't have, I mean, CUDA is not a language which will work across all these different types of devices, although it will work with all the NVIDIA devices. If you want to use across all the devices, then you might use a language like OpenCL to coordinate. Alternatively, you can use OpenACC as a Pragma based language. However, it so happens that all these GPU devices, right, all these GPU devices get numbered from 0 to n-1, right, and that is essentially used for making sure in the program that I'm launching a kernel on a particular device, right? So, and the API that gets used for this is CUDA set device. So I just set a particular device. I just use an API with a particular parameter 0 to n-1. By default, if you don't use this, which we have not used in any of our programs, so by default, all your kernels are going to get launched onto device 0. So even if you have 2 GPUs, you were always running your code on device 0, whichever that is. But if you want to run it on a different device, you just set CUDA device 1, CUDA set device 1, and launch the kernel as before without any changes to any of the arguments, and it will start running onto the second device. Right? So it's as simple as that. And yeah, any questions on this basic syntax? Okay. So then I have this question that what's wrong with this code from the parallelization perspective?
K1 and K2 are not running parallelly.
Why is that?
Like K1 gets completed by CUDA memcopy, and again we are setting other device and K2 gets completed by another CUDA memcopy.
So gets completed meaning
the kernel execution is over.
Good point. So that was a good observation by Kushal. We are using CUDA memcopy, which is a blocking call, right? And the whole purpose we are doing multi-GPU processing is to make sure that things run in parallel, K1 and K2 run in parallel. But this is not going to happen. They are going to run sequentially, although on 2 different devices, right? So we need to use async here to make sure that the host goes ahead, sets another device and starts launching K2 in that, right? So so this is something which you should be careful about. Otherwise, you will not see any performance benefit from multi-GPU processing. Okay, so with this basic aspect of multi-GPU processing, we'll stop here for today. If there are any questions, we can take those up now. Okay, so if there are no questions, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.